If you're relatively new to Bubble, you might have heard the term reusable element in passing. But at this point in time, I'm sure you're wondering, what on earth is a reusable element? And more importantly, when should you actually use one?
Tell us, come on!
Look, thankfully, reusable elements are relatively easy to understand. To put it simply, if you have an element that will look the same across multiple pages inside of your app, why should you have to redesign it every single time? Wouldn't it be great if you could design it once, then display that exact same element across any page you need? Well, the good news is that's exactly what a reusable element will do. As the name suggests, it allows you to reuse an element that you've already built. Inside of that element, you can even reuse all of the necessary workflows and conditions. Look, by the end of this tutorial, you'll have a clear understanding of absolutely everything you need to know. So what I'm gonna do is hand this one over to Dave, and he's gonna walk you through all of the steps.
Today I'm going to talk about reusable elements. These are assets that you use in many different places. So let me show you in the Bubble editor. On the left-hand side, you have your list of different kinds of assets, and if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you have a section called reusable elements, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So first I want to talk about why you would use a reusable element and what are the advantages. So the advantages are mainly three things. One is that you have modular construction. This helps you compartmentalize complex workflows because each task is in a separate compartment. I'll also show you the advantages versus copying and pasting the same thing over and over, which you can do, but their complications arise, and I'll show you the differences. So also, reusable elements save you time when you're trying to style different elements across your app. It keeps things consistent and saves your time because you don't have to go to each instance and restyle it. You can change it in one place and it will change all across your app everywhere you have the same reusable element. So let's hop in and I'll show you two different ways you can create a reusable element. So back on the Bubble editor, I'm using a CRM as context for the example. And in this example, we're going to have a pop-up that will allow the user to change the status of a sale. So in this example, we have a pop-up called Deal, and this will show the amount of the deal, who owns the deal, and right here we'll have a status box that you can update with this pop-up. And what we want to show is the pop-up on the home page and also show the same pop-up on a second page, which is just showing my sales, my deals. So here we have the same pop-up shown on this page. And I want to show you the difference between copying and pasting, which is how we have it now, versus using a reusable element. So let me quickly show you a preview of how this works. So here's the home page. When I click View Account, and here I can change the status of the deal to lead, closed, or lost. And then click Update, and that closes the pop-up. And I want the same workflow on another page called My Deals, which just shows a subset of all the deals. And then when I click each one, again, the same pop-up, the same workflow, and it closes when I click Update. So that's what I want to replicate. And I'll show you two different ways of doing it. And I'll highlight the benefits of using reusable elements to do this. So going back to the editor, and on the first page we have the pop-up called Deal, shown here, and I want to put that on the second page. I'm going to go to the second page and delete it so I show you what that looks like, starting from scratch. So back on the first page here, I can simply copy, so Command C, or you can do it from this window, right click here, copy, and if I go to the second page called My Deals, I can select the page, right click on the page and paste, and I get the same a copy of the pop-up here. So all the visual elements are there. However, you'll notice that the workflows did not copy over. So I would have to rebuild the workflow. So for example, if I click this update button and on the second page and I'm looking for the workflow, there's nothing there. And that compares to the first page where I copied pop-up from. There's the workflow that I'd have to remake on the second page. So going back to the discussion points, one of the main advantages is managing complex workflows. So when you create a reusable element, the workflow stays the same on each page versus copying and pasting where you have to rebuild everything. And similarly, when you have to change the style or colors or something like that, you also have to restyle each instance of a copy and pasted element compared to a reusable element. So now I'll talk about how to create reusable elements. There's a unique asset class, and you can build them starting from scratch or converting an existing element. And I'll show you both of those ways and also discuss navigating this unique asset class in the bubble editor. So jumping back to the bubble editor, there are two ways to make a reusable element. The first way is just to convert something that already exists and convert it to a reusable element. So if you click on that, right click on that, you'll get this menu and you have an option to convert to a reusable element. So if I click that and I name it, I get to name it, and I like to have the prefix so that I know this is a reusable element, and create. And now we are on a different page. And what's happened here? So if you go to the page navigation menu, you'll see all your pages here. And then down below, you have a section for reusable elements. So it's like its own page. Now what's happened over here on the right? You can see all of the elements are here, but they've been collapsed. And that's just because of the way the layout was formatted. The minimum width was set to 0, so they've collapsed down to 0. I'm just going to open those up so that we can see kind of what they normally would look like. I'm just going to set a minimum width of 200 for each element. There we go. And for the pop-up itself, I'm going to have a builder width of 500. And this just shows you the window on the building page. It doesn't reflect in the app itself. And I'm going to set a minimum width on the app 300 just again so I can see what's going on there. Now we have something that looks like the pop-up that we started with. And that's one way to create a reusable element, just to convert an existing element. And one other navigation point I wanted to show you. On the asset menu down at the bottom, there's a section called reusable elements, and our pop-up is now there. And so if we want to add that to an existing page, you'll note that when we converted this original pop-up, it did not add a reusable element to that page, and it didn't do anything to the existing pop-up. So it just created a reusable element on this menu without applying it to any particular page. So now what we have to do is apply that reusable element to the page itself. And so we can do that. We can select in the asset menu and then drop it onto the page, and you'll see it's added as a new overlay since this is a pop-up. And one other thing to look at is the workflow, what happened there. So if we go to the Appearance tab, first of all, you notice this is different. It doesn't look like the normal Appearance tab. And the reason is that you can't edit the reusable element from the page menu. Remember, it's considered a separate page. So you have the option to edit the element here, and that'll take us back to the pop-up page. And now we can examine the workflow of the pop-up. And if we click through, we'll see that the workflow has in fact copied over. So you are able to click that button. It will populate the parent group's deal and then also hide the pop-up when you click that button. So the workflow transferred over, which is what we want. And one other thing to note, the type of content also transferred over. So we know that this pop-up is populated by a deal type of content, and that copied over when we converted the existing element. So that's one way to make a reusable element. Another way is to just start from scratch and click new reusable element from the asset menu here. So if I click that, I can just create a new reusable element. and bubble will do its thing, and now we have a reusable element. And you'll notice that the default type of element that it makes is a group, but you can change that. So in our case, we would change it to a pop-up, and we would tell it to populate with the right kind of content, and then we can add all the parts that we had on our original pop-up. And that's great, like if you're starting from the beginning and you know that you're going to make a reusable element, you could just start with the blank slate from the asset menu. I'm not going to go through that. It's not what this video is about. And so now we've created a pop-up from scratch, and I'm just going to change the background so we can see what's going on as a quick example. And if I want to now apply that to either one of these, to an existing page, navigate to that page and drop it in. So there it is. And if I wanted to delete the reusable element, delete the whole thing, I go to the page menu and I click on the trash can. Are you sure you want to delete it? Yes, it's deleted. And you'll notice that on the page where it was before, that is not deleted. You have to delete that entry separately. So it'll tell you there was a reusable element here, but that was deleted. Now what do we do? And so you have to go in and delete that as well. So now we're going to keep the original reusable element that we made by converting the first pop-up. And now I want to apply this on the other page as well. So I'm going to navigate to the second page, the one that shows the user's deals, my deals, and I'll scroll down to the reusable elements, drop it in. And now let's check the difference between this and copy and paste. Remember, we had to redo the workflow, but here the workflow, as you recall, stays with the element. So if I examine the element and I look at the workflow, it's still there. So this is an example of making compartmentalized workflows. In this case, editing each deal happens with the pop-up, and that workflow is contained only on the reusable element for that pop-up and not on each individual page where that pop-up appears, where there might be hundreds of other workflows. So I have showed you two different ways to create reusable elements, and now I'm going to talk about the advantages of editing reusable elements, where you make one change in one place and it affects multiple different locations in your app. So if I go back to the editor and let's say I wanted to make a change to this pop-up, the reusable element pop-up, and remember I'll have to go to that page to edit it. And let's say I wanted to add something, a new piece of text. Let's say I wanted to add the time that the deal was created, and just to save on formatting, I'm going to copy that and then move it into place. There we go. And now I'll show you that every instance where this reusable element exists, that change will be shown. So if I go from the reusable element page to the first page, the index page, and I show the pop-up, there we have the creation date. And if I go to the second page and I show the reusable pop-up, there's the creation date. And that would be in contrast to, just to drive home the example, if I use the non-reusable pop-up, if I look at that and I make a change here, and just as an example, I'm going to change the background color. So if I change that here and I go to page 1 and I look at the pop-up there, it's not green like the change I had just made on page 2. So I would have to redo the visual elements for each instance of a copy and pasted pop-up. Whereas the reusable element, the changes, in this case the account owner, is reflected in all locations. So that is a major advantage of using reusable elements, is that it saves you time. One last thing I want to talk about is properties, which is a unique feature to reusable elements. So for example, if I wanted to have the same reusable element generally, but I wanted to make a specific change in a certain circumstance, I can do that by leveraging properties. And I'll show you an example of that. So if we go back to the reusable element page here and we look at the Appearance tab, you'll see a button that says Add New Property. And this can be anything. So I'm just going to say this will be, I'm calling it red. And I'm going to say this is a type of yes, no options and field type. And as you saw, that you can use this property feature to relay data across your app through this pop-up. And using this and conditional statements, you can make all kinds of changes based on all kinds of data. So I'm just going to do a yes/no decision and have changes based on whether the option is yes or no, and I'll show you that. Here you can also see that you can make a selection that's a list. You can make this field be optional. So when you set up a reusable element and you've added the properties, if it's optional, you will have the choice of using a response for this field or not. If you make it mandatory, then you'll see that the reusable element is in red and it won't set up until you make a choice for this property. So let's say it's mandatory and we add it. So it's a yes/no field, and now if we go back to the pages where this reusable element exists, you'll see that it's highlighted here. I need to make a choice of, is it red yes or is it red no? And I'm going to select red yes. And it's important to know that this is going to be independent to this version of the reusable element. So I'm going to label this to let me know that this is going to be the red version of the pop-up. And any changes that I make to this version of the pop-up will only stay on this version. They won't go across all fields. If I want to make changes to all of the versions of the reusable element, then I go to the editing of the element itself, which remember is from this button and going back to this page. And what I can do now is set up a conditional statement, for example, that says when red is yes, then I can say that the background color is going to be obnoxiously red. So what I've done is I've made the reusable element have a condition that's variable according to its location. So in this case, on page 1, we have red, and on page 2, I haven't made a decision yet. If I look at that one, it's still not decided. So that decision is going to be on a per instance basis, and here I will say no. And what should happen is that on page 1, it should be red, and on page 2, it will be normal. And first I need to clean up all the different options. So I'm going to eliminate our original pop-up, and I'm going to fix second page as well. Eliminating the first pop-up, and now changing the workflow on the first page itself so that when I click view account, it shows our reusable element. So I need to display data on the reusable element, the parent group's deal, and then I need to show the reusable element. And then from there, once the pop-up, the reusable element shows, the workflow inside of that is already saved on itself. That's what we talked about before. Now we're going through the pages themselves, and since we had deleted the original pop-up, we need to redo the workflows to show the reusable element. So on page 2, when I click this group, I need to show the reusable element. That is populated with the current sales deal. And then I show the reusable element. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Now if I preview, I should see on page 1 of the pop-up the red version, and on the second page the same pop-up but not red. And this is just a silly example just to show you how you can use properties in different ways to leverage those options. There it is, red. And if I go to my deals, should be the same pop-up, not red. Perfect. That's what we wanted. So I know that was kind of a ridiculous example, but it shows you another advantage of reusable elements and the properties and ways you can leverage specific data that is really handy.
And just like that, you now have a clear understanding of what a reusable element is and when you should use it inside of your application. I'm sure that once you start taking advantage of reusable elements, there's really no turning back. They're going to save you so much time throughout the process of creating your build. Now, if you found this video useful and you wanted to stay up to date with any additional Bubble resources I share, I'd always recommend hitting that subscribe button on my channel, so that way you can be the first to know whenever I drop a new tutorial. For now though, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for watching this specific video, and I wish you all of the best on your own no-code journey.